consumers, what should we do with our money right now, in general?
One important thing for household finances is the extent to which the economy continues to perform overall in a manner consistent with sustainable medium-term growth. And we look to in Thailand's case in particular, we still await more evidence on the overall economic policy strategy of the new government.
Now, the gold market, what's your prospect on that?
The run-up in the gold price, though, just my own personal view, does seem to reflect, it does seem to be correlated with the level of market concern over economic prospects and indeed sovereign creditworthiness. And sovereign ratings in the advanced economies in particular remain under downwards pressure, and concerns over the economic outlook, I think, are a large part of the kind of uplift to gold prices. I think there's also strengthening final demand for gold as a retail good, as a consumer good, particularly in India and China.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of talk about the emerging markets, about the BRIC countries becoming a powerful force on the world stage, especially economically. Is that what we are seeing, or has that already actually happened? Because once some crisis happen, we tend to talk or focus more about the US and Europe.
Well, I don't buy the decoupling argument, and I think that final demand in the advanced economies remains the most important thing for the performance of the whole world, including for the so-called BRICS. Each of them has problems of their own. Brazil has relatively high inflation and some signs of stress on asset prices. India has public finances actually that look rather more like those of an advanced economy than a BRIC, perhaps, with quite high public debt, albeit declining. And China has concern, well, we have concerns over the banking system in China in particular, going back to the what we were saying earlier about the aftermath of the strong credit growth in 2009 and 10. So as I was saying, I don't think that we don't believe the decoupling story. But nonetheless, the weight of these economies in the world is rising. And if we look at overall contributions to global GDP growth, which is an exercise that Fitch recently did, China's domestic demand surpassed that of the US in terms of its contribution to overall global GDP growth amid the slowdown in 2009. Now we'd expect that pattern to be reversed as the US recovers going forwards, but there's no escaping whatever temporary volatility may affect the BRICS and other major developing countries. And we should expect there to be a higher degree of volatility in these relatively lower income still economies. Despite the volatility, the trend over the longer term will be that they will be making a bigger contribution to overall global GDP.
Mm-hmm. Since you're based in Hong Kong, I have a question about Hong Kong actually. How important is Hong Kong today to China's economic growth, especially being a financial center, because Shanghai is a big financial center as well?
As a financial center, I mean, Shanghai suffers from the disadvantage of being within China's capital controls. So Hong Kong still remains China's window on the world. The visit of the Chinese Vice Premier a couple of weeks ago in connection with the issuance of a 20 billion renminbi China sovereign so-called dim sum offshore bond testifies to the ongoing importance that the Chinese authorities place on Hong Kong's role as China's window on the global capital markets.
Mm-hmm. As part of your job, you travel a lot. What's the general sentiments of confidence that people in different countries that you went to have on the world economy?
Well, I'm wary of putting too much weight on anecdotal evidence, although we're very fortunate in Fitch in having good contacts both with the major market participants and also with the authorities across the region, so we do get a broad range of views. I think certainly, and with the caveats that I mentioned on anecdotal evidence, the concerns that people are expressing seems to be more concern over the last 3 months, certainly. I think people are waking up to the kind of soft patch that we were talking about earlier with in the advanced economies, particularly the US, and that's led to intensification of concerns. But we've just come through the summer, which is a very thin period for markets, and I think people will be looking closely at the evidence coming out of the US, the Euro area, and other global economies to tell us where the world economy is heading. I think there was the latest confidence indicators from the US were still just in positive territory, so perhaps that's a hopeful sign.
And that's the broad picture of the global economy at the moment. With risks still persisting in the US and Europe, we just have to monitor the situation very closely. See you next week. สวัสดีค่ะ